G'day everyone, welcome to Inside Rugby with Mark, and on this episode I'm going to talk about a New Zealand sports journalist by the name of Mark Watson, who's made a few ripples across the rugby world in the last 24 hours by some comments he shared on a rugby show in New Zealand. And I want to put my 2 cents worth in this discussion as well. But more importantly, I want to hear what you thought of what he said. Then if you haven't seen it, well, I'm going to tell you what he said right now. So let's get into the show. As always, there's plenty of passion across the rugby world with different people having different opinions on everything, and that's what makes it so great sometimes. But I'm not for one of my fellow countrymen being arrogant and rude towards another nation, and that's what I thought Mark Watson was in some of his comments. However, he did have some good things to say as well that I support. So I'm not one of these people that look at someone's statement and says, well, it has to be good or bad. Maybe there can be bits and pieces of good and bad within a statement if we are open to listening to that. And that's what I was when I listened to Mark Watson make his statements. First of all, he said we should not be referencing the New Zealand All Blacks. We should not be being beaten by the Argentinian rugby team. There are no excuses. Well, as a lot of us have said in recent times, there is a merging of the talents at the top of the rugby world, and Argentina on their day can beat any other rugby team in the world. That's been a proven fact over the last 2 years, that's for sure. But when these things happen against the All Blacks now on a regular basis, it seems to upset a lot of New Zealanders. They can't handle things being a little bit different in the rugby world, and their expectations are very high. But at the same time, they might be raising some good points that New Zealand rugby is probably not doing the type of job that they need to do to make the game even better in New Zealand. So when I listened to Mark Watson making these comments, I was infuriated the way that he disrespected the Argentinian rugby fans. And as you all know, when you come to my channel, that's the last thing you're going to get here, is my rude and arrogant behaviour towards another rugby nation. I just will not stand for that. However, when it comes to looking at the deeper issues within our rugby universe, and in particular in New Zealand, my own country, there are a lot of things that have got question marks over them. And Mark Watson, I thought, proved a good point in saying some of those things. The first thing he said was, here we are ranked number 1 in the world as the New Zealand All Blacks at the moment, yet we're like a tennis player who's ranked number 1 and can't win a Grand Slam tournament. Well, the All Blacks have proven that as well over recent years, that they're not good enough and have not been good enough to win the Rugby World Cup. That's been South Africa's glory over the last 2 editions of that tournament. And then he goes on to say that the New Zealand domestic rugby scene is in chaos, and that a lot of these players are not getting the opportunity to play for the All Blacks. And why is that? Well, there's a very good point to be had, and if you look at the NPC competition, you'll see that New Zealand has a very good depth of rugby players. However, we've been talking, myself included, about the selection process of Scott Razor Robertson and getting these players an opportunity who deserve it to be involved in the All Black environment. And then Watson went on to talk about those New Zealanders who no longer play rugby for our nation or want to play rugby for our nation. He talks of Jamison Gibson Park, who wasn't apparently good enough to play in the New Zealand system and went off to Ireland, of course, to become very popular and also a regular number 9 in their jersey, along with James Lowe and Bundy Arki, who Mark Watson calls other rejects from New Zealand rugby that have had to go and play for another nation. So is this the case? Are we losing players to other nations? Are we not able to put our money where our mouth is and making sure these players stay in New Zealand? We've got the likes of Richie Mo'unga. And another point that Mark Watson brought up as well was the number of coaches and support staff that Razor Robertson has in this New Zealand All Blacks setup at the moment. And with all of these people, why are we getting the results that we're getting? Well, it could be a fair question if we knew what all those people were doing and who's responsible for what. It looks like on the surface that we know, but do we really know what's going on in the backgrounds? Let's cast our memories back to the appointment of Leon McDonald as well in the All Blacks setup, which didn't last too long. So is it a case that the All Blacks have got too many Chiefs and not enough Indians? Are we able to promote domestic rugby players into the All Black system and make sure that we're getting the best quality coming through? I think these are all very pertinent questions that we should be asking of New Zealand rugby. Where I draw the line on someone like Mark Watson's comments is when he attacks Argentina, in this instance, as being potential easy beats and the All Blacks should not be losing to them. Well, as you've seen on my channel a number of times, I have talked about how good this Argentinian team is, and maybe they're doing a lot of things that the All Blacks could actually learn from if they spent some time actually looking at what's going on within the Argentinian rugby system. I think what's going on in the world of rugby at the moment is pretty indicative of what we saw within the America's Cup sailing fraternity for many years ago. The Americans couldn't lose that particular cup until one guy came along from Australia called Alan Bond from Perth in Western Australia. And Alan Bond wrestled the cup off the Americans for the first time, and woe behold, the floodgates opened and everybody else started to believe that they could win the America's Cup. And lo and behold, the Kiwis came out, and now they're in a position of strength of having the cup a number of times. But the cup has also changed hands, and that's what we're seeing in the rugby world. And I think some fans could just not accept the change of the hierarchy and seeing these other teams being very, very good for the game. Watson goes on to say that the game in New Zealand would die if the All Blacks are not winning all the time, and that the sponsorship deals, the money surrounding the All Blacks comes in because they are one of the best winning rugby teams in the world. Well, I think the All Black team is strong enough as a brand to withstand some losses from across the rugby world. And as the Kiwis have done before, like in the America's Cup, when they lost it, they regrouped and they came back even stronger and more determined with new personnel to make the changes to win the cup again. And I think that's what we will see if the All Blacks go on a continuous losing streak. So to all my Argentinian friends across the rugby world, I apologise on behalf of my fellow Kiwi. His name happens to be Mark as well. No connection to me whatsoever, because he should not be saying the things about your great rugby playing nation that he is saying. However, he does raise some good points about the state of rugby in New Zealand, and New Zealand rugby needs to look deep and long at itself in terms of the way that it's administering the game and whether or not it's doing the right thing for the players that are coming up, the youngsters, and also keeping the talent in New Zealand that we need to build the best rugby team in the world. I'm sure this conversation will carry on for many, many years and months ahead, so I look forward to being part of it here on Inside Rugby with Mark. So there you go, those are my thoughts around the comments made by New Zealand journalist Mark Watson recently on a rugby show in New Zealand. Yes, I do think he was arrogant in one stage, and yes, I do think he had some very strong facts about the way that rugby is managed in the country of New Zealand. Let me know. Look, in closing, I'll just say this. There's plenty of arrogant New Zealand rugby fans. There's plenty of arrogant South African rugby fans, of English rugby fans, of French rugby fans. But there's a lot more of fantastic rugby fans that love the game for what it is. So for all those outspoken ones that have a disrespectful position on another, there's thousands and thousands of others that love and support and respect each other. So let's keep that as the main code of our game. And I'll see you all again very soon right here on Inside Rugby with Mark. Until next time, it's adios from beautiful Cancun in Mexico. Bye for now.